Hello friends and my dear students, today we will discuss on the topic History and Development of Pharmacovigilance. The contents of this topic will be definition of pharmacovigilance, difference between ADR and adverse event, goals of pharmacovigilance, major aims and objectives of pharmacovigilance, examples of drugs withdrawn due to pharmacovigilance, historical evolution of pharmacovigilance, and scope of pharmacovigilance. So let's start. Now, what is pharmacovigilance? Now, pharmacovigilance actually is ensuring drug safety. It is a pharmacological science relating to the collection, detection, assessment, monitoring and prevention of adverse reactions with pharmaceutical products. Now, if we see pharmacovigilance and break it into two words, pharmacon means drug and vigilare means to keep a watch. So it's a type of continuous monitoring of unwanted effects and safety related to the drugs. So let's see what is the definition of adverse drug reaction. Definition related to ADR and adverse event. Now, what is an ADR, adverse drug reaction? It's a response which is noxious, which is bad, and unintended, that means not intended, and which occurs at the doses normally used in humans, used for prophylaxis, diagnosis or therapy of disease, or for the modification of physiological function. This is the WHO definition. Now, basically, it's characterized by a causal relationship between the drug and its occurrence. That is, it is just being possibly related to treatment by the reporting health professional. Now, what is the difference between ADR and adverse event? Now, adverse event is any untoward medical occurrence that may present during the treatment with a pharmaceutical product, but does not necessarily have a relationship with this treatment. So, we have to see this. This is the major difference. That means adverse event, there is basically do not necessarily have a causal relationship with the drug and its adverse event. Now, why pharmacovigilance is required? The cost of drug-related morbidity and mortality has exceeded $177.4 billion in 2000. So, ADRs have been the leading cause of death. ADRs lead to increase in hospital admissions, and in patients are prone to develop more ADRs, which will extend the hospital stay. Escalation of hospital costs. ADRs are very expensive, because ADR's related cost to the country has exceeded the cost of the medicines. Majority of reactions can be prevented. That means they are preventable. As we normally say, dying from a disease is sometimes unavoidable, but dying from a medicine is totally unacceptable. Now, why pharmacovigilance is required? This is because due to limitation of clinical trials. As we all know, that before going for pharmacovigilance, there are clinical trials, and in them, small number of patients are being tested. The tests are taken, is undergone in restricted population. That is age, sex, ethnicity. Then in clinical trials, the studies are done for only narrow indications. It is only done for shorter duration of drug exposure. Now, pharmacovigilance is needed in every country. Why? The monitoring of ADRs in every country is very important because ADRs differ from country to country due to differences in drug production, distribution and use. Like in some countries, some drugs are used for different indications. The dose is different. The availability matters. Then there's difference between genetics, diet, traditions of people. Like some people like to use herbal remedies. And due to pharmaceutical quality and composition of active or inactive ingredients. Now, what is the goal of pharmacovigilance? The major goal is ensuring rational and safe use of medical drugs. Sometimes ADR only comes to light after a drug has been launched in the market and has been used by a larger population. Now, basically, pharmacovigilance ensures assessment and communication of risk and benefits of drugs in the market, as well as educating and informing patients. So, what are the major aims of pharmacovigilance? The first aim is to improve patient care and safety in relation to medicines and all medical and paramedical interventions. To improve public health and safety in relation to the use of medicines. To contribute to risk-benefit assessment, that is, It is helping in assessment of benefit, number 1, harm, effectiveness, and risk of medicines. To promote understanding, clinical training, and effective communication to health professionals and the public. Now, what are the objectives of pharmacovigilance? Basically, it is helping to decrease mortality, that is death rate, as well as to decrease morbidity associated with adverse events. To identify unrecognized adverse drug events. Early detection of unknown ADR and drug interactions. Quantify previously recognized adverse drug reactions. Detection of increase in frequency of known adverse reactions. Identification of risk factors and possible mechanisms underlying adverse reactions. Estimation of quantitative aspects of benefit risk analysis, and spreading of the information needed to improve drug prescribing and regulation. So the major objective is to evaluate the effectiveness of the medicines in the real world situations. Now, what are the activities under pharmacovigilance? The international pharmacovigilance systems aim to monitor the risk-benefit ratio of the drugs as well as improve the patient safety as well as their quality of life. So the activities include, number 1, collecting and managing data on the safety of medicines, looking at individual case reports, which I'll be telling you in the next video. So it helps in detecting new signals. Now, what are new signals? New signals are the unknown adverse effects of the drugs, which are unknown, not yet known. Then other activities include proactive risk management to minimize any potential risk associated with the use of medicines. Communicating and informing stakeholders and patients. The seamless post-marketing surveillance is done. Why? It is aimed at protecting our public health. It also allows the controlling authorities to modify on the basis of newly discovered signals. Now, basically, all it is helping in development of summary product characteristics released by the marketing authorization holder for any new medicinal product. Now, this SPC I'll be telling you in the coming videos. So, what are further actions? Setting guidelines to ensure safe use of drug. Product recall. Updating package inserts. Add warnings to the use of drug. Drug withdrawal from the market. We'll see this in the next slides. So normally when we say a product is being recalled, what it means? It means there's a request to return, exchange or replace a product after manufacturer discovers that there is some defects in its product that can hinder performance, that can produce harm to the customers or produce legal issues for the producers. So as I told you, I'll be telling you the examples of the drugs which are withdrawn due to this post-marketing surveillance, which we call as pharmacovigilance. Pride got withdrawn in 2000 due to cardiac arrhythmias. Troglytazone withdrawn in 2000 due to hepatotoxicity. Rabacurinone, it withdrawn in 2001 due to fatal bronchospasm. Cerebastatin withdrawn in 2001 due to rhabdomyolysis. Students, myo means muscle, lysis means breakdown. So here there is breakdown of the muscles and rhabdo means that it is going in a particular frequent manner as the dose is increasing. So rofecoxib withdrawn in 2004 due to cardiovascular events. Valdecoxib withdrawn in 2005 due to dermatological adverse events. Like this, we have so many drugs which are getting withdrawn due to this pharmacovigilance. So let's see the historical evolution of pharmacovigilance. Okay, it started in 1848. We'll be doing this all in detail. So a girl called Hannah, she died because of consuming chloroform. She was given chloroform while she has to undergone some toenail operation. In 1937, USA with the solvent diethyl glycol. So I'll be telling you about the sulphanilamide tragedy here. In 1938, Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act was established and the public health system was renovated. In 1955, the gastrointestinal toxicity of ASA, that is acetyl salicylic acid, was proved. In 1961, McBride's letter about the tragedy of thalidomide, the event was held. Actually, McBride was an Australian doctor and he wrote to the editor of the Lancet journal regarding this tragedy. In 1964, the yellow card was structured in the UK. In 1965, the European legislation was developed. In 1968, the WHO program of international drug monitoring was started. In 1995, the European Medical Agency was set up. So let's go one by one in detail. As I told you, 1848, death of 15-year-old girl. Hannah Greener from the north of England died after receiving chloroform anesthetic. It was given to her before removal of an infected toenail. As a result of these deaths and alerts raised by clinicians and public about the safety of anesthesia, the Lancet Journal established a commission to take on this problem. Then in 1906, US Federal Food and Drug Act was formed, and it established that drugs must be pure and should be free from any contamination. In 1937, there were 107 deaths in USA because of the use of sulphanilamide ELIXIR, which contained a very harmful solvent, diethylene glycol, and this solvent was the major cause of deaths, right? But the manufacturing companies were not aware about its toxicity at that time. So let's see, what is the sulphanilamide ELIXIR tragedy? Now, this ELIXIR was a raspberry flavored syrup, and it was prepared by simply mixing the sulphanilamide, which was normally difficult to dissolve. So sulphanilamide was mixed in diethylene glycol, and this ELIXIR was given to the children. It was manufactured by SE Messengial Company of Bristol. The company had tested ELIXIR only for its apparent palatability, but had not tested in the clinical trials. In 1937, more than 100 children died after its consumption. You can see how drastic this tragedy was. The reason was the toxic solvent diethylene glycol. So American Medical Association chemists say diethylene glycol was added to sulphanilamide, and this caused drug fatality. So around 107 children died because of this tragedy. So after 1937 tragedy, the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act was established in 1938 in USA, and the main aim was to renovate the public health system. Now, the new system required safety testing of new drugs before they come to the market, before they are given the market approval. And so NDA, the new drug application, should incorporate safety data according to this act. In 1950, there was a setup of Blood Discrepancies Registry on Drugs of American Medical Association. Now, following the reports of association of aplastic anemia with the use of chloramphenicol, as these adverse events were coming with the use of chloramphenicol. Then, in 1955, it was proved that acetyl salicylic acid can cause gastrointestinal diseases, and therefore it currently should not be given in patients with gastrointestinal ulcers. All these events were resulting in pressure on governments. Business took over legalization and guidance as well as evolution of regulatory bodies to protect the safety of patients. Now, the most disastrous event, Thalidomide disaster, which is coming in the next slide. So second half of 1950s and 60s was highlighted by this Thalidomide tragedy. The idea of pharmacovigilance actually took shape after 1961, after this Thalidomide tragedy was reported. Let's see what is this tragedy. Now, this was a drug marketed in 1956 in Western Germany, and it was mainly used as a hypnotic or a sedative drug to calm patients. And later it was found that it can manage nausea in pregnant women. So it was given to pregnant women. And then finally it was seen that the babies born to the pregnant mothers suffered from a major congenital defect, that's malformation of limbs. As you can see from the photograph, the fingers are very short, they're stunted. So they're malformation of limbs, and this was called as phocomelia. So first reports of birth deaths came in 1959. In 1961, first there were 13 reports. Gradually, 10,000 infants were affected by phocomelia. You can see how bad effect this thalidomide it had on the infants. So it was withdrawn shortly afterward. Now this basically, earlier no toxicity was detected during clinical trials prior to the launch in market. So this required that drug monitoring should be established worldwide. So thalidomide disaster brought about significant changes in safety monitoring system world over, with active participation from regulatory authorities, industry, healthcare workers. Then yellow card system came up in the UK. Now this is a specific form to compile a spontaneous report of drug toxicity. As you can see it in the figure, it's a yellow card report. In US in 1962, there was an amendment requiring safety and efficacy data of drugs before pre-marketing submission was approved. So safety data have to include that teratogenicity should be done in 3 different animals. Now what is teratogenicity? Students, teratogenicity means a monster-like effect. A monster-like effect that was actually an ability to produce very bad effects in a fetus, in a growing infant. When a particular drug is given to a pregnant woman, their babies are actually suffering from this teratogenic effect. So US said that teratogenicity test must be there in 3 different animals. Because of this, all of this, WHO program for international drug monitoring started. Now this it began in 1968 with Uppsala Monitoring Center, UMC in Sweden, being the collaborating center for this global initiative. The main function of this coordinating center is communication of safety signals, recognized through analysis of global data. Now global data of what? Of the areas. So WHO has started promoting pharmacovigilance at the country level. So at the end of 2010, 127 countries were the part of the WHO pharmacovigilance program. India became the member of this WHO program for international drug monitoring in 1997. So like this, a lot of drugs have been withdrawn from the market. Thyroidazine, valdecoxib, rosiglitazone, sibutramine, oxyprenalin, all you can see because of cardiovascular disorders. So students, this is my last slide of the presentation. So what is the scope of pharmacovigilance? The biggest advantage of monitoring and recording all events in pharmacovigilance is to prevent, minimize, deliberate reoccurrence of adverse events or ADRs. Patients are protected from unsafe drugs. Post-marketing surveillance is a learning aspect for not only investigators and sponsors, also for the doctors. A new observation can add to precautions being taken to clinical use of a drug. A new clinical observation, if serious enough, may add to contraindication of use of drug. Contraindication means should not be used. That drug should not be used in particular indication. There are events where repeated observation of a serious adverse events, a large number of patients can lead to withdrawal of a drug, as we have seen from the last slide. So there have been events. So I would say that drug regulators receive important data that helps them to take regulatory decisions only through pharmacovigilance. Thank you all. I hope you could understand what is the history of pharmacovigilance and how it developed, and basically what is the goals, aims and objectives and scope of pharmacovigilance. Thank you all.